The VA is doing something that they have never done before, or at least not to my knowledge. The VA is reaching out to veterans through email, through mail, through other correspondence. They've notified VSOs of the situation as to this August 14th of this year, 2024 deadline for the PACT Act. Now, I know you're going to say PACT Act was signed in August of 22, which is correct. They had the effective date all the way up to August-ish of 2023. But if you have an intent to file on or before August 14th, 2023, the deadline to submit that claim for PACT Act retroactive pay, so back pay, is August 14th of this year. Now, to be very, very honest with you, the VA absolutely jacks up the retroactive effective date all the time. Seriously, all the time. It's extremely annoying, and veterans generally have to do a higher level review for the effective date on PACT Act related claims to actually get it backdated to August of 22. There are only very, very rare niche situations where a veteran would not be awarded back to August of 22, assuming you have the intent to file. Now, let's say you don't have the intent to file for PACT Act claims. Not a big deal. The PACT Act, the PACT Act is a piece of legislation. There is no such thing as a PACT Act claim. They're just conditions that are covered under the PACT Act, okay? So let's say you don't have an intent to file and you submit for sinusitis or rhinitis or asthma or COPD, or you're a Vietnam era veteran submitting for hypertension and exposure to Agent Orange. Doesn't matter. The PACT Act is here to stay, okay? You can wait 20 years and the PACT Act will still be there, presumably, and then you can be awarded service connection. The August 14th deadline is just for back pay. Now let's talk about PACT Act, okay? PACT Act, there's a huge healthcare side of the house to the PACT Act that we're not going to cover. We're going to talk about the disability claim side of the house for PACT Act. You need the big three for every single claim: the in-service event, the current diagnosis, and the nexus. The nexus is either medical in nature or presumptive in nature. PACT Act is going to be on the presumptive in nature side. So what does that mean? A presumptive nexus means the VA concedes, saying, hey, you have this diagnosis, you were in this location during this time, double check mark, diagnosis, you meet the time location criteria, you are awarded service connection. That's just service connection. That has nothing to do with what percentage you're given, what percentage you're not given. PACT Act is just service connection. You still have the rating criteria for that, and that goes with every single other disability. So for sinusitis, it can be 30%, 50%, right? There's a 10% rating in there as well. For asthma, 30, 60, 100. Tons of ratings for various conditions. Hypertension, largely going to be rated at 0 or 10%. There are quasi-presumptive secondaries for hypertension, so if you're a Vietnam era veteran, you're going to want to look into those. We just dropped a video on hypertension. I'm going to go ahead and link that below in the pinned comment. But regardless, the PACT Act, being service connected on PACT Act, has nothing to do with the rating given. Nothing at all. Zip, nada, zero. The rating given is based on symptom severity, just like every other claim. PACT Act is for service connection. Again, if you have the intent to file on or before August 14th of 2023, you need to go ahead and get that claim submitted. August 14th of 2024 is the absolute last date as of right now. There's been no extension. August 14th of 2024 is that last date to submit your PACT Act claim, assuming you have the intent to file on August 14th. That's just one date. Let's say you did your intent to file on June 10th of last year. Well, guess what? The deadline for you is going to be June 9th of this year, okay? So, doesn't matter. You've had a year up to this point. You need to submit your PACT Act related disability claim. Make sure you have documented symptoms. I always recommend veterans submit that claim with a current diagnosis. At this point, that ship has sailed, okay? If you don't have a diagnosis by this point, personally, in this scenario, I would just submit the claim. And if you aren't diagnosed at the C&P exam, which is a large possibility, okay, you can at least retain the effective date with an appeal, but you've had a whole year to be diagnosed. For whatever reason, if you need more time, go get that diagnosis now. Submit the claim now, work on the diagnosis, and just prepare for an appeal, assuming you aren't diagnosed at the C&P exam. Yes, I always recommend veterans submit their claim with documented symptoms and a current diagnosis, okay? Bonus points if there's treatment plans with that, like surgery, nasal spray, medication, physical therapy, anything that's treatment based, that is pretty solid medical evidence for documented symptoms, and that would lead a C&P examiner to give a diagnosis for VA rating purposes if for whatever reason you already don't have one. I did have a video, and I'm going to go ahead and link that below in the pinned comments as well, on how to find your treatment codes and your diagnosis within your VA medical records. It's super easy, actually. You can do it in about probably 10 to 15 minutes. Synopsis: you're going to go to Blue Button Report on My Healthy Vet, download your VA medical records, Control F SCT and Control F ICD. SCT is the VA's treatment code. That's not a diagnosis, okay? Not a diagnosis. It's just a code that the VA will give in your rating when they are treating a condition. But those SCT codes for VA rating purposes are absolute solid medical evidence for that claim. A formal diagnosis is going to be ICD, which is International Classification of Diseases. The ICD codes are a formal diagnosis. So yes, ICD is the standard. I think we'll set the standard here. SCT, that treatment code, is good enough for VA rating purposes, right? If you submit a PACT Act claim and you have 0 documented symptoms, you don't have a current diagnosis, but you were in Gulf War in the early 90s and you have chronic fatigue syndrome, or you've self-diagnosed that you're fatigued all the time, that doesn't mean diddly squat, okay? You've got to get documented symptoms. You've got to have your diagnosis. I promise you, your life will be a billion times easier if you submit your evidence-based claim. Fully developed claims up here, so the in-service vent, the current diagnosis, and the Nexus with the DBQ, that's up here. I'm not recommending everyone submits a fully developed claim, but you want to get up to as close to that as possible, okay? So your in-service vent and your current diagnosis, everyone can submit that with their claim. That would be an evidence-based claim.